The galaxy was endless and full of mysteries, but in all corners of space, there was one strange fact whispered among the stars. Every alien race, no matter how advanced or how powerful, spoke with respect when the word human soldier was mentioned. They spoke it with care, sometimes with fear, and always with respect. Why this was true, no one explained openly. Outsiders only knew fragments of the story. Rumors of battles where the humans stood when no one else would. In the year 2478, when humanity had just begun to expand beyond its own solar system, the Galactic Council was already thousands of years old. Great alien empires gathered there, races with ships larger than cities and weapons that could burn planets. Humans were still considered young, almost children of the stars, but something had already started to change in the way the galaxy looked at them. A transport ship drifted into the dark sector near the Orion Rift. Carrying traders from 3 different species, they spoke to each other in low voices. One was a tall insectoid merchant, its eyes glowing in the dim light. Another was a reptilian pilot with scales shining like polished stone. The third was a small creature with soft fur, who looked harmless but was skilled in trade and deception. All 3 whispered about the same thing. They had heard a rumor, an old story, that human soldiers were unlike any other. They do not surrender, the insectoid said, its mandibles clicking nervously. They do not fear death, the reptile hissed back. They fight even when the war is lost, the small furry creature added. None of them had ever seen a human soldier with their own eyes, but the fear and respect in their voices were real. Somewhere deep inside, they knew the story was true, far away. On the frozen battlefield of Zeros 4, the ground was still marked with craters and broken machines of war. Years ago, this planet had been the place where the galaxy first saw what humans could do. At that time, a hostile alien empire had invaded, bringing thousands of soldiers and weapons. The defenders were few, and most races believed the battle was already lost. Among those defenders, there was a small unit of humans. Soldiers from Earth who had never fought on such a strange world before. The alien commanders laughed at the idea. How could humans, a species barely stepping into space, stand against the might of ancient empires? But what followed was something that burned into history. The human soldiers dug into the frozen ground. They carried weapons that looked weak compared to the alien machines, but their eyes were filled with fire. The first wave of attackers came with machines taller than buildings, yet the humans did not run. They fought in silence with steady movements and courage that shocked even their allies. Days passed. The humans refused to retreat. When food ran out, they fought on. When ammunition was low, they turned wreckage into weapons. When their numbers fell, the survivors carried on with unshaken will. One soldier was seen crawling with broken legs, still firing his weapon, refusing to let the enemy advance. Another, wounded and bleeding, stood on a ridge and signaled for air support while holding back an entire squad of enemies alone. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed something different. Humans did not measure battles by victory or defeat. They measured by how long they could protect others, how far they could push themselves, and how much they could endure. To other races, this was madness, but in that madness was something terrifying. The invaders eventually won the planet. But the cost was greater than anyone expected. Thousands of their best soldiers had fallen, broken not by superior weapons, but by a handful of humans who simply refused to fall. After the battle, whispers spread through every starship and every council chamber. Those who had fought against the humans never forgot the sight. The word soldier now carried a new meaning. The galaxy began to ask a quiet question. Why do these humans fight like that? Why do they stand when all logic says they should flee? The answer was not yet known. But from that day forward, even the greatest alien generals lowered their voice when they spoke about human soldiers. And thus, the mystery began, a mystery that made every alien race respect them. Even before the full truth was revealed, the story of Zeros 4 spread like fire across the galaxy. In council halls, in merchant ships, in secret war rooms, aliens spoke the same words. Do not underestimate the humans. But but no one could fully explain what made them different. The galaxy was full of strong warriors. There were species built with armored skin, creatures that could crush steel with bare hands. Armies with technology that could erase cities. Yet none of them inspired the same kind of respect and unease as humans. In the years that followed, humans joined more campaigns across different star systems. They were still considered young compared to other races, but whenever battles began, eyes always searched for them. Sometimes their numbers were small, only a few soldiers in a larger army. Sometimes they were advisors, allies, called to help defend worlds that were not their own. But every time, the result was the same. The humans left behind a memory that others could not forget. On the desert moon of Carthus, a fleet of war machines landed, bringing chaos to the cities carved into the sand cliffs. The native defenders cried out for help, and among the forces that arrived were 30 human soldiers. Just 30. The enemy army was more than 1,000 strong. The odds were impossible, and even the defenders whispered that it was hopeless. But the humans did not care about the numbers. They marched forward in the burning heat, their armor covered in dust, their rifles steady in their hands. They did not fight like machines. They fought like fire. Every time one human fell, the others grew fiercer. They refused to give ground, refused to let the enemy feel safe. And soon, the 1,000 attackers felt something they had never felt before: fear. The battle lasted 3 days. When the smoke cleared, only 12 humans were still standing. Their armor was broken, their weapons nearly destroyed. But the enemy army had been crushed, scattered like sand before a storm. The defenders could not believe what they had seen. 30 against 1,000. And somehow the 30 had won. Word of Carthus spread even faster than the story of zeros. 4. Alien commanders began to speak carefully whenever humans were mentioned. In military training academies, cadets whispered that fighting alongside humans was both terrifying and inspiring. They fought with a madness that no other race understood, and yet in that madness, there was something powerful, something that bent the outcome of battles. But not all aliens admired them. Some feared them. Some believed humans were dangerous, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when logic said to stop. To these races, humans were a storm, a force that could not be controlled. And storms, they believed, should be kept far away. One night, deep in the shadow of a ruined battlefield, an alien officer spoke to his commander. Why do they fight like this? What drives them? They have no reason to fight so hard for worlds that are not their own. The commander, older and wiser, looked at the stars and said quietly, because they are human. Because something in their blood does not allow surrender. Because they do not see the universe the way we do. They do not fight only for victory. They fight for each other, for duty, for something unseen. And that is why we respect them, or fear them. Yet the mystery remained. Even among humans, there was no simple answer. Some said it was history, that Earth had been a world of endless struggle where humans learned to survive through pain. Others said it was heart and emotion too strong to measure, something that pushed them beyond the limits of their bodies. Whatever the truth, every new battlefield added another piece to the legend. The galaxy had seen many empires rise and fall, but never before had it seen a young species gain such respect so quickly. And deep in the dark corners of space, whispers grew louder. If this is what human soldiers can do now, when they are still new to the stars, then what will they become in the centuries to come? For some, that question was filled with hope. For others, it was filled with fear. But for everyone, it was clear. The respect for human soldiers was not only about the past, it was about the future that awaited them. A future that would test the entire galaxy. The galaxy had begun to change. Every major alien empire, no matter how proud, had started to look at humans with a mix of caution and respect. But no one truly understood how deep this respect ran until the War 4. Targon Prime.Targan Prime was not a beautiful world. It was dark, covered in swamps, storms, and endless fog. Most soldiers hated to even land there because the ground swallowed machines and the air burned the lungs. But when an ancient alien empire invaded the system, the defenders had no choice. They called for help. And once again, among the reinforcements were humans. Only a small company of them, fewer than 100. Their allies thought they would not last even a day on such a world. The swamps would poison them, the storms would blind them, and the enemy would crush them quickly. But what happened shocked even the oldest veterans of war. The human soldiers moved like they had lived in such hell all their lives. They crawled through the mud without fear. They used the fog as cover, and they turned the swamps into traps. Enemy machines sank into the ground while humans moved quietly, unseen, until it was too late. For weeks the war dragged on, and the alien invaders could not understand how such a small force kept striking again and again. In one famous moment, a squad of 10 humans was surrounded by more than 100 enemies. The invaders shouted at them to drop their weapons. The humans looked at each other and then smiled. Instead of surrendering, they launched a sudden attack. Explosions lit the fog, gunfire echoed in the swamps, and when the smoke cleared, the 100 enemies were gone, while 4 humans still stood, bleeding but alive. News of that moment spread faster than light. Even the invaders who hated humans began to speak of them with a strange respect. It was said that in the heart of a human soldier was something no weapon could measure. Courage, madness, loyalty, no one could find the right word. But every alien who fought them felt it. The respect was not just about their victories. It was about the way they fought. Humans never abandoned their wounded. Even under heavy fire, they carried their injured brothers and sisters. Even when retreat was ordered, they stayed behind if someone was left. Other races were confused by this. To them, logic said survival came first. But humans placed something else above survival. One alien medic who worked alongside them wrote in his journal, "They are strange creatures. They bleed more than any species I have seen. They break, they fall, and yet they rise again. And when they fight, it is not for themselves alone. They fight for the one beside them, even if it means death. I do not understand them, but I cannot help but respect them." The war for Targon Prime ended in a way no one expected. The invaders withdrew, not because they were fully defeated, but because the cost of fighting humans had become too high. The swamp planet was saved, but more importantly, the legend of human soldiers grew even greater. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, leaders began to discuss them seriously. Should humans be welcomed as equals, or should they be watched as a danger? Some argued that humans could be the protectors of the galaxy. Others whispered that one day, if pushed too far, humans could also become its greatest threat. But for the soldiers who had stood beside them, the answer was simpler: respect, not blind fear. Not blind admiration, but a respect that came from seeing something rare. Something that no other species had ever shown on so many battlefields. The galaxy was beginning to learn a truth it could not ignore. Human soldiers were not like others. They were something new, something that could not be explained by logic alone. And deep in the silence of space, many wondered, what price would the galaxy pay when the full strength of humanity was finally revealed? The war for Targon Prime had ended, but the memory of human soldiers did not fade. In fact, it spread even further. In every corner of the galaxy, from the grand fleets of the oldest empires to the pirate dens hidden in asteroid belts, the same thought was whispered. Humans could not be ignored. They were not the strongest, not the most advanced, not even the most disciplined, but they carried something that unsettled everyone who saw them fight. And soon, the galaxy would see it again. A new crisis had begun in the region near the Veil Nebula. A brutal warlord known as Valak, the Unbroken, led an army of mercenaries across the stars. He did not conquer worlds for resources or survival. He conquered for pride, leaving destruction behind him. Dozens of planets had already fallen, their defenses broken, their people enslaved. Alien commanders, who had once laughed at humans, now requested their aid. Desperate to stand against Valak's endless forces, so it was decided. A coalition fleet would rise, made up of soldiers from many races. Among them, only a single battalion of humans was sent. To most observers, they were too few, too inexperienced to make a real difference. But when the fleet reached the warlord's stronghold, those doubts were tested. The first battle was brutal. Valak's forces stormed forward with overwhelming numbers. Energy blasts ripped through ships, and the ground shook as massive walkers crushed everything in their path. The coalition began to break. Some units surrendered, others retreated into the darkness. But not the humans. On the ruined plains of Dravik, where smoke covered the sky, the human battalion stood like stone. Their formation was tight, their movements steady. Even when waves of mercenaries crashed against them, they did not bend. One alien officer, watching from a distance, could hardly believe it. He recorded in his report, "They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like survivors who will never yield, no matter the cost." The humans were outnumbered 10-1. Their supplies were running out, their weapons overheated, and yet they did not falter. One squad leader was heard shouting, "Hold the line!" even as enemy fire tore through the ground around him. Another soldier, wounded and barely standing, dragged his comrade to safety while still firing his weapon with the other hand. For Valak, this resistance was an insult. He sent his elite guard, warriors, who had crushed dozens of armies before. But even they found themselves halted. The humans did not fight for glory or for conquest. They fought with a fire that turned every moment into a nightmare for their enemies. At one point, when the coalition line was collapsing, the humans counterattacked. No one expected it. With smoke and flames all around, they charged directly into the enemy's heart. Their war cry shook even the bravest mercenaries. It was not technology that gave them strength, but the sheer force of will that no alien could match. The battle dragged into the night. By dawn, only fragments of the human battalion remained, but their stand had turned the tide. Valak's forces were slowed, his advance broken. The coalition, inspired by what they had witnessed, rallied behind the humans. For the first time in months, the warlord retreated. In the aftermath, alien leaders debated endlessly. Why would humans risk everything when defeat seemed certain? Why did they not retreat like others? The answer was never clear. Some said humans were reckless. Others said they were stubborn beyond reason. But even the most critical voices could not deny the truth. Without the humans, the Battle of Dravik would have been lost. Respect grew deeper. The galaxy no longer called them young or unprepared. Instead, they were called something else, unbreakable. But while others celebrated, a darker question began to rise. If human soldiers were capable of such defiance with so little, what would happen if they ever built armies as vast as the empires around them? Would they still be protectors? Or would the galaxy one day learn to fear them more than any warlord? That question lingered, heavy and unanswered. As the legend of human soldiers continued to spread, the Battle of Dravik changed everything. From that day forward, no alien commander dismissed human soldiers as weak or inexperienced. They had seen it with their own eyes. Men and women standing against impossible odds, refusing to surrender and forcing even the strongest warlord to retreat. The galaxy now spoke of them with open respect, but also with quiet fear. And then came the War of Helios Gate. Helios Gate was not a planet. It was a massive station built near a dying star, a fortress that controlled trade routes stretching across half the galaxy. Whoever held the gate controlled billions of lives. When a powerful syndicate of raiders seized it, entire civilizations cried out for help. Armies were sent, fleets gathered, but every attempt to retake Helios Gate failed. The raiders were too well armed, too well fortified. When the Galactic Council met to discuss the crisis, one voice said what others feared to admit: "Send in the humans." At first there was silence. Then came hesitation. The humans were few, and the gate was one of the most dangerous strongholds ever built. But one by one, the council members agreed. Not because they expected humans to easily win, but because they knew one truth when humans fought. The impossible became possible, so a strike force of human soldiers was chosen. Only 200 of them, armed with standard weapons, facing thousands of raiders inside the fortress. To outsiders, it was madness. To the humans, it was just another mission. The attack began in the dead of night. Shuttles cut through the darkness and latched onto the outer walls of Helios Gate. Alarms screamed as the humans forced their way inside. What followed was chaos. Raiders unleashed heavy firepower, filling the corridors with death. But the humans advanced steadily, step by step, never stopping, never turning back. Every hallway became a battlefield. Every chamber echoed with the sound of rifles and the shouts of defiance. When one squad was pinned down, another squad flanked the enemy. When ammunition ran dry, they used blades, fists, and sheer determination. The raiders could not understand it. Other armies had broken against them. But these humans fought like shadows, refusing to yield. One raider commander was heard shouting in panic, "They do not fear us. They do not fear death." Hours turned into a full day. The humans carved their way through the fortress, leaving broken steel and silence behind them. And yet, even as they pushed forward, their losses grew. Out of 200, only half remained. Still, they fought on, driven by something invisible. Something stronger than fear. In the final chamber, where the syndicate leader held his throne, the last surviving squads of humans entered. They were bloodied, exhausted, and outnumbered. But their eyes burned with the same fire that had been seen on Zero's 4. On Karthus and on Dravik, the Raider Lord demanded their surrender. His voice shook the walls as he promised them torture and death if they resisted. The humans only raised their weapons. Their commander, a woman with scars across her face, spoke just 3 words: "Helios Gate falls." And then the chamber erupted in fire. The battle was savage, the cost heavy, but when the smoke cleared, the Raider Syndicate was gone. The humans had done what no fleet, no empire, no great army could achieve. Helios Gate was free. When news of the victory spread, the galaxy reacted with shock and awe. Entire races sent messages of thanks. Soldiers from other armies began to wear small human symbols on their armor, not out of fear, but out of respect. For the first time, humans were not seen as newcomers to the stars. They were seen as legends, but not all were pleased. Some alien leaders watched in silence, their thoughts dark. If a few hundred humans could bring down a fortress like Helios Gate, what might thousands or millions achieve one day? The respect for human soldiers had grown into something greater, but so had the fear of what they might become. And as the humans buried their fallen and prepared for the next war, the galaxy whispered a single question. Were these soldiers destined to remain protectors? Or would they one day become conquerors? The victory at Helios Gate was remembered as one of the most daring missions in galactic history. Statues were built, stories were told, and songs were written about the human soldiers who had stormed a fortress and reclaimed it against all odds. Too many, it was the final proof. Humans were no longer just newcomers among the stars. They had earned their place in the galaxy with blood, courage, fire. But respect was not the only thing humans carried now. Fear followed them, too. In the high chambers of the Galactic Council, leaders spoke in quiet tones. Some argued that humans should be celebrated, made guardians of the Council itself. Others argued that they should be carefully controlled, their armies limited, their reach contained. And in the shadows, darker whispers grew. If humans could defeat warlords and syndicates, what would stop them from one day turning their strength against the galaxy itself? While politicians debated, soldiers on the front lines told a different story. They told of humans who refused to leave anyone behind. They told of men and women who fought with broken bones, who stood their ground when no hope remained, who turned defeat into victory. For the soldiers of other races, respect for humans was not political. It was personal. On the frozen world of Iridian, an alien commander once asked a human sergeant why they fought so hard, why they never surrendered, even when it meant certain death. The sergeant looked at him and simply said, "Because if we don't, who will?" That answer, so simple, carried more weight than any speech. It was the truth behind the legend. Humans fought because they could not accept leaving others to fall. And yet, the galaxy's respect did not erase its questions. Reports of new human armies training back on Earth spread like wildfire. Fleets were being built, Soldiers drilled, weapons tested. Some allies felt safer knowing humanity was rising. Others trembled, fearing that one day, the very soldiers they admired might march across their own worlds. The dual image of the human, soldier group protector to some, threat to others. But the soldiers themselves never thought of glory or conquest. On the battlefields far from the council chambers, their reasons were always the same. They fought for each other. They fought for duty. They fought so the galaxy would not fall into darkness. One final story sealed their legend. Years after Helios Gate, a massive invasion came from beyond known space. A species no one had seen before swept into the galaxy with terrifying speed. Worlds fell like burning stars. Armies broke. Fleets shattered. Fear spread across every system, and then the humans came. Not in vast numbers, not with superior technology. They came with the same fire they had always carried. They stood on dying worlds and held the line until reinforcements arrived. They threw themselves into battles where defeat was certain, and somehow turned those defeats into survival. Where others saw only endings, the humans carved new beginnings. One alien survivor of that invasion, years later, told his children the story. We had lost everything. The sky burned. The ground shook. We thought it was the end. But then the humans stood before us. And when I saw them fight, I knew the galaxy still had hope. That was why every alien race respected human soldiers. Not because they always won. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest. But because they never gave up. They were a reminder that even in the darkest night, there was a species that refused to kneel, refused to surrender, refused to die quietly. And so, across the stars, the legend remained. In every council hall, in every academy, in every war camp, one truth was repeated. If a human soldier stands against you, prepare yourself. For you may win the battle, but you will never forget the fight. The galaxy had seen many warriors, many empires, many conquerors, but none like them. The soldiers of Earth, the soldiers who carried both hope and fear in equal measure. The soldiers who turned respect into something eternal and in the silence of space. One truth echoed forever. This was why every alien race respected human soldiers.